Welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital mediator Warren Fry, and with me I have...
DCN-JOC editor Lindsey Cole.
Once again, we're going to do the news segment for the program. Later on, we're going to talk about digital twins with two people from SNC-Lavalin. But for right now, Lindsey is here to give us the scoop on what is going on in the West and the East. Starting with the East, Lindsey, what is happening?
Oh, we have quite a few things on the go this week. Obviously, we're doing some continued coverage of the Toronto mayoral race. You can expect our final profile story on candidate Anthony Furey coming out this week as well. And then we're going to be doing a roundup for our readership so they can kind of get a gauge on who we covered on the candidate spectrum and some key highlights in their campaigns. And then obviously watch for coverage on the 26th when the voters take to the polling stations and cast their ballot. So you can expect whoever wins the election, it'll be a new era for Toronto, we'll say.
I've seen that Olivia Chow is kind of in the lead and everybody else is not so much in the lead, but she's definitely the person to watch, apparently.
Definitely, yeah. She's definitely a front runner right now by a fairly substantive margin. But, surprisingly, depending on what polls you're taking a look at, there's some interesting candidates that are coming up in the ranks. One of them is Anthony Furey. And then, it was typically between, Mark Saunders and Anna Balau. But now we're seeing some different names come up. So it really just depends on where you look at things. And, Olivia may be in the polls, leading the polls by a landslide right now, but you never know on voting day. So it'll be very, very interesting to see what ends up coming out. Another kind of interesting and highly, I wouldn't say politicized, but certainly covered story that we followed as well was the thought of the city of Vaughan potentially putting up a gondola pretty much in the middle of a fairly prominent roadway that would take passengers to some of the more notable destinations in and around Vaughan, such as Vaughan Mills Mall and good old Canada's Wonderland. But I would like to say that this is definitely only a conceptual idea at this point. So while there's been a lot of buzz about it, and it's been kind of one of those quirky stories that we follow from time to time, similar to like Hyperloop, for example. Right now, the city of Vaughan is definitely making it clear that it is not implementing a gondola system anytime soon. So it was interesting to... Go ahead.
These always seem like, and is it renticular or the one that's kind of on the ground? Like they're always a hot button topic, and I can't really figure out why. They seem like pretty simple 19th century technology we should all be used to by now, but they always seem to cause a furore of some sort.
Yeah, it's true. But conversely to that, they're also always in the news as being considered. They just never seem to come to fruition in certain spots. Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition, I guess, if you will, about the feasibility of these things. So for Vaughan, anyway, they were just kind of taking a look at some potential transportation plans, and aerial mobility was considered, and obviously the gondolas are a part of that. Hey, you never know what can happen down the line. It doesn't seem completely out of the realm of possibility in the sense that it would alleviate some transportation and transit woes, and hey, it might look cool too. So you never know.
But as of right now, maybe I'll come to beautiful downtown Vaughan just to see this gondola.
Maybe, but as it sits right now, it certainly is not going to be implemented. So that was kind of a quirky little thing that we covered. Another story that was part of our U.S. pipeline of coverage is an interesting study that came out from Fixer.com, and it's called The Best Paying Jobs in Home Building. And interestingly, and shockingly as it might seem, in the state of Illinois, drywall tapers, yes, take home more pay than other skilled trades like carpenters, for example, and even some people in management. So the report obviously has some caveats to it, and it's taking a lot of different information from different states and whatnot. It says it's it took a look at the top 20 paying occupations in the U.S., taking their information from the Occupational Employment and Wage Statistics, which is
Mhm.
obviously released by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. But it's interesting how they broke it down, and there's probably more info to come about it. But you know, tapers were the highest paid. They average about 62,000, a little over 62,000 a year. Um, for this specific trade, and it was just kind of a different type of piece showcasing where different states have different salaries and different trades make a different amount of money, and then if you compare that to Canada, there's obviously some big differences there. So
Mhm.
I recommend checking it out because there was just some interesting findings when it comes to the labor spectrum, and where people sit on their salary, so or their wage I should say. So I thought that was pretty neat.
I would imagine
um
that's a demand thing too. Like they're just it's
Yeah,
not to I'm
definitely.
sure it's just it's skill to have, right? So but there can't be that many of them, so that's probably why. But that's
You're
that's just my guess.
No, no, you're absolutely right. And it obviously speaks to the ongoing labor shortages across the
Mhm.
country and in North America. So, um, absolutely. One of the things that we definitely wanted to highlight is tomorrow when well, I guess I should say today, when this podcast comes out,
Mhm.
it will be National Indigenous Peoples Day in Canada. So we highlight it every year, and this year both staff writer Don Wall and staff writer Evan Saunders covered some different issue-based stories, I would say, that have an Indigenous connection to them.
Mhm.
So the first one is the by Don, and it's covering a new apprenticeship program that's being administered federally. It's called the Native Women's Association of Canada. They have their program in particular is trying to attract Indigenous women and to the trades, and they're hoping to attract 4,000 jobs. Or is targeting, excuse me, looking to target 4,000 jobs. So it's just an interesting program that seems to be providing a lot of the supports that may be specific to Indigenous women or just women in general, or for that matter, people on a recruitment spectrum.
Mhm.
So, they're looking at mentorship, they're looking at, providing supports to employers. They're looking also at fellow other supports for the apprentices. A lot of the Indigenous women who might be interested in such program might have challenges with where they live and where they're located,
Mhm.
often in remote communities. So this does take a look at some opportunities for them and support systems in place. So it's a nice initiative to see that they're taking a look at. It's one more mechanism, as far as I'm concerned, at looking at how to attract underrepresented groups to the trades
Mhm.
more prominently. So it's a good program there. And Evan's story actually tackles um, a new. Well, I shouldn't say it's new. It's going to put it at the forefront, I suppose. It's called the First Nations Infrastructure Institute. And it's
Mhm.
going to be obviously a First Nations led organization that supports Indigenous groups when it comes to creating sustainable infrastructure, per se, or asset management, planning, helping to just um, provide advice and support when it comes to projects that may have a federal component to them. Oftentimes, they may get funding, but it may not be do exactly what the community might need. Maybe
Right.
it's multifaceted. Sure, they might get wastewater treatment funding, but there might be another component to that that would help the community. So this just helps kind of bridge that gap and provides good communication support systems. So we thought, this would be good to unveil on a National Indigenous Peoples Day to highlight how the industry and how First Nations are working together collaboratively to you know try to get some projects off the ground that will benefit everybody, but obviously First Nations communities. So, Evan kind of dove right into that. So you can certainly check that out.
Mhm. And you've got more from the West too, right?
I do, yes. So kind of some quick hits for you, I suppose. Um, We've reported on this in the past, but the Pacific National Exhibition is obviously looking at redoing their amphitheater. Warren, you've been there before, I take it,
Yeah.
to
It's well,
actually.
it's the reason they're redoing it is because it's old. It's been around for I think 100. One of the roller coasters is at least 100 years old. It's made of wood. So yeah, it's they may have replaced that by now, but it's the PNE has been around a long time and entertained generations of Vancouverites.
See, I am not familiar. I've never been there. Driven by it, but never been there.
Mhm.
But essentially, the design for the amphitheater has been unveiled. Pretty cool looking, actually, and it's going to be considered the largest free span timber roof in the world. So once again, showcasing mass timber and the use of timber in the West, which I think is becoming quite prominent out there.
Mhm.
But yeah, it looks really, really cool. I highly suggest checking it out on our website. We have a news brief on it. It's going to have a capacity for 10,000 people. And it's just kind of one of those cool little quick hit news items that shows a transformation of kind of a notable location in Vancouver.
Mhm.
So there's that. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that a request for qualifications has gone out for the massive $4
Mhm.
billion George Massey Tunnel replacement, which we all know this project
Oh
has
yes.
been subject to many stories in the JOC,
Yeah.
much
Much
controversy.
ping-ponging between governments and such. Yes.
Indeed. So now an RFQ has gone out. Um, and it's going to take a look at the project scope includes replacing the I'm going to say this wrong, Warren, the
Mhm.
D slow bridge, and I don't know, and the
I
addition of
I
a
don't either. I'm not sure what bridge you're talking about.
and the addition of a southbound lane on Highway 99
Hmm.
between Westminster Highway and Highway 17. But essentially, we all know that the replacement project's going to get rid of the old tunnel
Mhm.
and out with the old, in with the new, with a new 8-lane toll-free tube tunnel. So pretty cool project. It's good to see some action on it when it comes to an actual RFQ to the main components of the project. I know there's been other items that have happened in relation to it. But yeah, so I thought I would certainly mention that because it might be of interest to our listeners today.
Hmm.
But those are some of the key items. Obviously, there's more in the queue this week, but those are some of the key items to have a read or watch out for.
Okay, well then up next we're going to talk to, or I did already, talk to Jean-Pierre Rivard and Mathieu Latouche from SNC-Lavalin about digital twins for healthcare projects. With me today I have
Mathieu Latouche, healthcare sector lead for SNC-Lavalin.
And Jean-Pierre Rivard, so I'm the lead BIM manager for the mechanical electrical team in Canada.
And we're here to talk about digital twins and health infrastructure, which SNC-Lavalin has some experience with. So my first question is, what are some of the digital health infrastructure generally has requirements that other things don't? Like, if you're building a school, there's certain things you need. Building a residential complex, something else. But health is kind of above and beyond almost anything other than maybe the military. So what are some of the digital requirements for that you need to work around or like work into a health infrastructure project?
Well, those are very complex infrastructures, and the challenge for us is they have a lot of different issues that they need to work around. And one of them will be that they need to make sure that they control or have the best, most optimized solution regarding logistics in the facility. So they need to make sure that the movement of people, the sick people, the nurses, the doctors, the operations people, the visitors, will work fluently, and they also need to make sure that the material movement in the facilities is
Mhm.
also done in a proper way. So you've got soiled materials going one way, you've got clean, sterilized material going the other, and you got to make sure that these things never cross. And
Mhm.
that the solution you've got in place is the best. So you need to be able to simulate those things before you get to construct the facility. And if you were talking about an existing facility, one thing we may want to do is, well, we want to study how it's actually done so we can maybe improve upon that. And the other
Mhm.
thing is, given the nature of the people that are using those facilities, whenever you got a mechanical equipment failure somewhere, there's going to be a lot of impact on the activities within the hospital. So if you've got a pump that fails, maybe you're going to have to shut down some medical equipment, and then you're going to have to postpone examinations for a lot of people, and we cannot afford that kind of thing. So this is the kind of challenges we deal with when we are creating a digital twin for an hospital, and that's one of the main reasons we should, as a society, go into that direction.
Yeah, I think what's unique, Warren, is the criticality of those installations. Let's say any ICU emergency room, the impact on the patient for any equipment shutdown, whether it's a air handling units or any of that, the patient gets highly impacted. So I would say that's where the digital twin comes in play, and why it's so important in the market is how critical those installations are. And most of those hospitals are going to be running 24/7, 365 days a year. So any equipment replacement planning is important because the hospital and the building needs to stay live at all times. So.
Now, given complicated projects, that's usually where innovation happens. So what, in a general sense, what are some innovations in the digital space that you found came out of working on health infrastructure?
Although the main thing for me is the ability to do predictive maintenance. And that's really where the digital twin shines the most. So it's the ability to put sensors on any asset that you have to monitor the conditions and to use the data that we get from those sensors to say, well, we think we're going to have an issue with that piece of equipment. We should, send someone to look at it, assess the situation, and then say, well, we may need to replace that equipment. We may need to refurbish that equipment. And given that now we know that we're going to have an issue before it actually happens, we're able to, order the pieces, order parts, and plan ahead. So we're going to decide when we're going to do a shutdown. We're going to select a time where it's convenient for everyone, and we're going to do the work there. And that's to me, that's the main attraction to the digital twin. But of course, we can go further than that, because once you are able to say, well, we can put an age to every piece of equipment we have, we can start to say, well, I can manage my money as well in time, so I can know when I need to put money down to repair some stuff, or we can put that money somewhere else. There's a lot of possibilities like that, and that's one of the main things that came out of this.
And we think over time we're going to be able to use the digital twin farther in the process, even helping with, let's say, bed management. We know how much that's an issue for any hospital. Like when the people are exiting the ER and needs to go within a room, artificial intelligence and possibly digital twin will help in the future to support that. To how can we facilitate the work that's being done by the employees in the hospital? So we think that's definitely something that digital twin can support on in the future. So
now, the health industry is much like the construction industry, very paper bound. Like, and there's been changes and things have gotten better, but you guys know as good as anybody else does in being in construction that people tend to stick to paper for a variety of reasons, some of which are actually legitimate. So not just being hidebound. So how do you work digital infrastructure into that, knowing you're going to need to work around that or work past it?
Well, that's a very good question you got there. And the key to this thing is always to show to people what's in it for them. And sometimes they will, they'll want to stick to their old methods. But once you get them to sit down in front of the actual digital twin and you show them why it's more efficient, you're looking for any kind of information regarding a pump. So instead of having to go through a large quantity of paperwork to find the correct list of spare parts or whatever you need to find for that pump, you simply ask the database to show you where it's located. It's going to give you all the information you need to be able to service that pump. And so if you're able to show to these people why it's more efficient, how they're going to be able to, find information in a quick, easy manner, that's how you can win them. And that's what we're trying to work on. We had the exact same issue 15 years ago when we started to do design with a digital model, where we would, model in 3D the whole facility. And we had to take all technicians and run them through that new way of doing things. They were at first reluctant to go that way, but once we show them why it's more efficient, how they can access the information. I mean, they went full speed ahead with that because it minimizes errors. It's easier for us, and we can do more, and we can look, and we can start to say, I'm not just giving you a solution that works. I'm giving you a solution that is optimized. And it's the same thing for operation and maintenance people.
Yeah. And I feel a lot of private public clients that we have, they just need guidance through that process. It's not that they don't want to change. Sometimes they need support. They're not sure where to start. And that's where we can help them through that process. And we see a lot of clients. We're even working on the Vaudreuil-Soulanges construction near Montreal. And the whole project's completed under a BIM 70 approach. And that's something in the past, a few years ago, possibly we wouldn't see. So we see a lot of clients, and those were requirements from the clients on that project. So we see clients here evolving, and they want to be, even a public client wants to be industry leader. And we think digital is going to be part of the requirements that we have on the project in the short term. So
one of the other things I've found covering BIM and digital twins and other similar stuff is that there's a lot more collaboration from the start. It's I don't know if it's specifically lean, but it's kind of more that approach than it is the old top-down sort of way. So do you find with health infrastructure that's similar, or is by the fact that it's health and there's a lot more checks and balances, and does it have to be different?
Well, it has to be done that way because it's the only way we can get the digital twin to be useful, because I'm a designer. I don't operate myself, so I need the input from the operators to be able to build something that will be meaningful to them. So we need all the stakeholders to be part of the team at the beginning of a project. So we need to get, the owner, the operators, the designers, and in the best of the world, we should have also the construction manager with us, because they will also give meaning to the information we put in the database. And sometimes they will tell us, well, you know what, we should go with that supplier because it's easier to get access to material, because we know there's a shortage for the other ones. And so it all makes the process a lot more easier for us if everyone's involved at the beginning. It's not always easy to get everyone involved, depending on the kind of project, but that's the goal we should reach for.
Yeah. And I think even sometimes the requirements are not clear. We should ask ourselves the question, can we have the model and everything be digital twin ready? So if we decide to go that route in the future, at least everything's in place and the client can decide to do it later on and still benefit from everything that was done in the past. So I think we, as part of any project kickoff that we're doing at the beginning of the project, we should think about these elements. So.
Okay, and finally, this is not a health infrastructure project, but it is one of the first you did digital twinning on the Canada line. What were some, it's a very dissimilar project, but what were some of the things you did in that you said, oh, now we can apply this to this very different sort of environment?
So I spoke earlier about the ability to do predictive maintenance, and that's something we tried on the Canada line, and so we have experience with that, and we know we can push that to the next level with the health infrastructure. Being able to add sensors to any sensible piece of equipment gives us access to a lot of data. And then the trick is to be able to use that data and maybe use AI to support us in that task. But we need to be able to come up with algorithms to help us make decisions about the assets we have in hand.
Okay, Jean-Pierre, Matthew, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Thanks for your time, Warren. We were really happy to be here and get a chance to talk about SNC-Lavalin's expertise in the healthcare space. So thanks for the invite.
And up next, I have another interview from the American Institute of Architects conference, which was held last week in San Francisco. This one is with Glen Birx. He's the Chief Operating Officer of Ayers Saint Gross, and that's a firm that has been investigating the possible causes. He goes into several and how it's not conclusive yet of the Champlain Towers collapse from last year. So without any further ado, here's my interview with Glen that I think you'll find very informative. The reason we're talking today is because you just put on a presentation about the Champlain Towers disaster at the AIA. And one of the things I found interesting is how one of the things you stressed was there are no answers yet here. Like everybody's looking for this is the answer. There are a whole bunch of possibles. And maybe you could go into what some of those possibles were and how they're going about finding them.
Yeah, we've looked at the evidence that's available, and there's actually pretty good evidence available about what happened here. the final decision as to causality remains to be seen. However, some of the evidence shows pretty clearly a number of things that contributed to this. Maybe NIST's study will make better determination of percentage of causality, but the issues are, we do know that the collapse started at this one column under the pool. So you have to focus on why that column collapsed. Now, we've seen other potential problems elsewhere in the building, but that building may still be standing if it wasn't for this one column that failed. And the column failed has a number of possibilities. One is potentially rebar reinforcing problems, overweight, over more live load than it was designed for because of the addition of some planters, concrete planters and trees above it, and particularly that the pool deck was not sloped. So ocean water as well as pool water was ponding on there and probably increased the rate of corrosion. And this one column was very susceptible to all of that.
Now, I hate to use the term opportunity, but what happened was the South Tower collapsed. The North Tower is basically its twin, essentially?
Yes, it's very useful and unusual, right? You normally don't have these kinds of situations, but it's something that NIST is looking at. It's something that we looked at in our presentation for comparison. Now, you still don't know for sure. You can't get everything out of that, right? Because you can't, unless you, well, what we can do now is go back, and maybe NIST is doing this, and doing some x-rays of the rebar situation. It's quite possible the rebar situation in the north is very different from the south, even though the drawings may have said the same. But there's, so you can't get everything out of it, but it's certainly very helpful, and you can see the factors.
And another thing that happened was a tourist, not coincidentally, because she heard the noises before, I think 7 minutes before it collapsed. So she went down and got video just out of curiosity, it sounds like. And that's vital evidence now that you guys are using to understand how this happened.
Yeah, that one piece of evidence is really critical, right? Because the other evidence is people in the building that heard things and reported things before it happened. But this tourist video showed that one column had collapsed. The building was still standing, but that one column had collapsed. And what happened later was a chain reaction. A concrete building fails slowly until the final, pancaking starts. And that's what happened here. So that's why there is so much focus on that one column. And hopefully this can help us with some of the tests that they've done to determine why that one column fell.
And just finally, this is more of a general thing. At the beginning of your presentation, you talked about the Tacoma Bridge collapse and how you saw it as a young person, and it kind of imprinted on your mind, and you sort of signed off on hundreds of buildings, and every single time you think of that. And so maybe you could speak to that and to just generally how these sort of events affect people in the profession.
Yeah, well, they do, and that was a watershed for me. It really did made me question whether I should go into this profession, to be honest with you. But in a sense, it was good because it increases the awareness, the need. When you put, as a registered architect, because of the legal requirements and licensing requirements, when you put your stamp and signature on a drawing, man, that's serious. And you better take it serious. We do as a profession, and we do the best we can. With certain limitations that we have, and we certainly aren't responsible for everything.
No.
A lot of people think we are, but we're not. Construction, things change in construction that we don't control, and obviously that's not our problem. But it's a heavy weight on our shoulders that we have to continue taking seriously. And a project like this, a collapse like this, so many lives lost like this, just reinforces that to me. And hopefully to every other architect that's seen this.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
And that's it for this episode of the Construction Record Podcast. You can hear us on Amazon Music, Apple Music, and Spotify, as well as on the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. And we'll have links to all the stories that Lindsey and I mentioned at the beginning of the show in our show notes. Thanks for listening.